When I was 18, my sister leaned in during a family dinner and said it so softly, I almost missed it. You'll never be more than a disappointment. But the way she said it, like a fact, not an insult, landed harder than any scream could have. A week later, my father changed the locks. My mother left a duffel bag outside the front door. No goodbye, no explanation, just silence. They said I was emotional, unstable, a stain on the Castillo name. But the truth? I just couldn't stay quiet about what they were willing to ignore. For the next 15 years, I disappeared. I changed my name, cut my hair, and erased every trace of who I was. Not because I was ashamed, but because I knew if they ever recognized me, they'd try to bury me all over again. And then, one ordinary afternoon, I walked into a courtroom in Charleston. My sister, Valerie Castillo, sat at the front table, facing charges I never imagined she'd live long enough to earn. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. The judge paused, squinted toward the back, and asked, "Wait, is that Noel Carter, the governor of Oregon?" Every head turned. Valerie's mouth fell open. And in that suspended moment, everything they ever said about me, every word of shame, of silence, of exile, cracked apart under the weight of my presence. But before I tell you what happened next, let me take you back. To where it started, to the last Sunday dinner I ever sat through in the Castillo house. The air was thick with August heat and stricter expectations. The long mahogany table gleamed under the chandelier's golden light. At the head sat my father, Colonel Sebastian Castillo, retired Army general, family patriarch, and master of unyielding tradition. Beside him, my mother Evelyn, flawless in pearls and pinched pride. He raised a glass. "To Valerie," he announced, newly promoted assistant district attorney for Charleston County, and this week's local hero on Channel 5. The TV behind him was muted, but Valerie's face glowed on the screen, smiling, polished, perfect. "That's my girl," he beamed. Everyone clapped. Everyone but me. I sat at the far end, quiet, my fork paused mid-air. No one asked how my graduation went the week before. Not that they forgot. They just didn't care. I had earned a full-ride scholarship to an art program in Savannah. I walked the stage alone. Not law, not medicine, not Castillo enough. I hadn't even told them the date. What was the point? They called me the soft one, the dreamer, always sketching, painting, reading Neruda and Maya Angelou instead of quoting case law or polishing resumes. My backpack wasn't leather like Valerie's. It was red canvas, stained with ink and defiance. At the dinner table, I was an echo, a shape they stopped seeing long before they stopped talking. But I didn't know it would be the last night. Not yet. That came the next morning. A text. Then another. Then a voicemail I never wanted to hear. By the time I opened my laptop, it was everywhere. A private video. Of me. From spring break, 2 years prior. My body. My voice. My face. Stolen. Uploaded. Shared. The one behind it? My ex-boyfriend. Bitter. Spiteful. A man who couldn't stand that I left him. I hadn't known he still had that video. I hadn't known he was capable of something so violating. But before I even had time to cry, my world collapsed. Valerie found it first. She sent it straight to my father with one line. "You need to act before this ruins everything. Not to protect me, to protect the family name." Dinner that night never happened. Instead, my father burst into my room, his rage a living thing. "You think we raised you to be seen like this?" he spat. "For the world to watch you like some cheap—" He didn't finish. He didn't have to. "I didn't post it," I whispered. "I was the one violated." "You violated this family!" he roared. He picked up my university diploma and tossed it onto the bed like it was trash. "You want to live like garbage? Then do it without our name, without our roof, and without our money." Behind him, my mother stood in the hallway. Rosary clenched so tight, her knuckles were white. She didn't speak. She didn't even look at me. I turned to Valerie. She stood still, arms crossed, eyes cold. Not a flicker of guilt, not even a blink. I packed in silence. Just a few things: my sketchbooks, my journals, that red backpack. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting narrow lines of shadow across my room. When I stepped into the living room, my father placed my bank card on the table. Don't call. Don't write. My mother peeked through the curtain as I walked into the night. She didn't wave. She didn't pray. She just watched, like I was something already gone. The first night, I slept in the back seat of a friend's Corolla, windows fogged, heart hollow. By the third night, her boyfriend started asking how long I'd be staying. On the seventh, I bought a bus ticket with what was left in my account. Destination: Portland. I chose it not because I knew anyone there, but because it sounded like a place where no one would ask who I used to be. On the second night of that ride, under an overpass near Reno, I climbed out of the bus during a stop and pulled out a leather-bound notebook. It held birthdays, family recipes, notes my mother used to tuck into my lunchbox. I sat on the curb, shivering, tearing each page one by one, feeding them to a lighter I had borrowed weeks ago and never returned. The flames licked the pages hungrily, quietly, until there was nothing left but ash and the memory of warmth. I looked into the reflection of the bus window. My face was tired. My hair, long and heavy with the weight of the girl they wanted me to be, fell like a curtain over my eyes. And I whispered to no one, "I've got nothing left to lose, so I'll start with what's left of me." Portland in late autumn was gray in a way that seeped through skin and soul. The cold here didn't bite. It settled. I found a room in a converted garage in East Portland. The paint peeled from the ceiling. The radiator coughed more than it heated, but it had 4 walls, a door that locked, and enough quiet to think. That made it mine. I got a job washing dishes at a 24-hour diner off Sandy Boulevard. The manager didn't ask many questions. As long as I clocked in on time and didn't steal silverware, I was welcome. At night, I took a second job cleaning a community clinic, scrubbing exam rooms, wiping away blood smears and leftover sobs. No one there knew my name. I signed my paperwork as Noel Carter, a name I chose from the spine of an old poetry anthology I found in a library bin. Each night, after double shifts, I collapsed on a secondhand mattress that smelled like old bleach and frayed dreams. But I had a mirror, and every few days, I looked into it, not searching for beauty or blame, just to remind myself I still existed. I didn't speak to anyone unless I had to. Instead, I wrote. Not full sentences, just fragments. Lines in a code I invented as a kid, so even if someone read my journal, they wouldn't understand. It was my way of bleeding without leaving stains. Sometimes I painted. When tips were good, I bought dollar store brushes, and tubes of acrylic. One night, after a customer threw a drink in my face and called me stupid trash, I came home and painted a figure. It was a woman, collapsing into herself, limbs folding like wet cardboard, her face half sketched, half erased. I didn't sign it, just tacked it behind the curtain in my room where no one would ever look. That felt right. Then came the scissors. No ceremony, no dramatic playlist. Just me in the bathroom mirror, at 2 a.m. I cut off my hair. Every heavy strand that had once been braided by my mother, pulled by my sister, praised by my father. Each snip was a goodbye. I didn't cry. It wasn't grief, it was release. I looked at the stranger staring back at me in the mirror, sharp-eyed, silent. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. The next morning, I registered a new name at the job board downtown. Carter N. Just initials. Enough to hide. Enough to rebuild. A week later, during a graveyard shift at the clinic, I heard shouting down the hallway. Spanish. Urgent. Panicked. I turned the corner and saw a woman with a small child clinging to her legs, being yelled at by a security officer. "Sign here," he barked in English, jabbing a finger at a clipboard. "It's already processed. Just sign. You're being discharged." The woman didn't move. She didn't understand. I stepped forward, my voice steadier than I expected. "She's not signing that!" The officer turned to me, irritated. "Who are you?" "She's not signing," I repeated. I glanced at the form. The date fields were blank. The signature line already marked. Your documentation is incomplete, I said. You can't force this. It was a lie. But he didn't know that. He backed off with a grunt, muttering something about interference. Later that night, while I mopped the clinic's hallway, a woman approached me. She wore a navy scarf, glasses, and the kind of quiet that made people underestimate her. I saw what you did, she said. I'm Rafael Delgado's assistant. He runs Harbor Bridge, the advocacy group down the street. I tensed. We need people like you, she added. Not as a cleaner. I didn't answer her right away. The next day, I showed up at the Harbor Bridge office, not with a resume, but with a question. What exactly do you think I can do? The assistant, Elena, smiled and handed me a clipboard. You already did something. At first, I was just a helper. I sorted mail, refilled toner, served coffee in paper cups during late-night legal clinics. But I watched everything. How Raphael spoke to the women who came in terrified of deportation. How the volunteers calmed crying children while filling out intake forms. How no one ever asked where I came from. So I stayed. They asked me to translate documents. I said yes. Then someone asked if I could rewrite one of our grant applications in plain English. I said I'd try. That night, I stayed up until 3 a.m. writing. It wasn't just grammar and formatting. It was finding the right words to make someone in a distant office understand that these weren't just numbers. They were mothers, fathers, futures. The next morning, Raphael slid the printed grant across his desk and looked up. You've got a voice, he said. I nodded, unsure what to do with a compliment that didn't come with a condition. Weeks turned into months. I started helping organize town hall events and drafting outreach materials. I learned to write proposals, balance budgets, and navigate policy language like a second skin. At night, I took free online courses in public policy. On weekends, I snuck into city council meetings just to watch how power moved in a room. It was never the loudest voice that won. It was the calm one that knew where the paper trail led. Still, I kept my past locked tight. No full name on documents, no social media, not because I was hiding, but because I wasn't ready to be found. Every night I lit a candle in my apartment, in front of an old family photo, but my face in the picture? Scratched out. Not from rage, just from necessity. Be remembered for what you do, not for what they called you. I whispered it each night before blowing out the flame. One day, after we helped a family of 4 who had fled cartel violence find emergency shelter, a young intern looked at me and asked, Why do you do this? I didn't hesitate. Because I don't have a family to go back to, I said. So I'm building a place where I might belong. There were no violins, no dramatic music, just the truth, quiet and whole. Over time, people began to ask for me by name. Well, part of it. Is Carter available? She's the one who helped my cousin. She knows how to fix the forms. But I was still the girl who painted alone behind a curtain. Still the woman who had only one dress shirt that fit. Still the person who flinched every time she saw a Charleston area code flash on her caller ID. 3 years after I tore a forged deportation notice from a mother's trembling hands, I stood in a city hall chamber with polished wood walls and echoing ceilings. I was no longer the one mopping floors. I was now Noelle Carter, community director, grant writer, organizer, policy contributor. I took a breath, adjusted the mic, and read a 5-minute policy proposal designed to stop the city's cooperation with federal immigration raids. Afterward, a city councilman in a starched tie leaned in and said smugly, Justice is good, but law is the foundation. I looked him in the eye. If the law refuses to grow with justice, I said, then justice stops being lawful and starts being ornamental. The room went still. Someone clapped, then someone else. Later, a journalist from the Portland Citizen approached me. We want to do a profile, he said. Immigrant advocate, rising star, the face of quiet reform, that kind of thing. No headshot, I told him. No full name. Call me N. Carter. He blinked. That's unusual. I've already been seen in the wrong ways, I replied. That night, I added a new painting to the wall. It showed a mountain rising out of a mass grave, its summit shaped like a woman's open mouth. I didn't sign that one either. But for the first time, I stood and looked at it for a long time, not with fear, but with recognition. I was starting to believe that maybe silence could be something other than absence. Maybe it could be power. Maybe, just maybe, it could be mine. 2 years later, my name started appearing in whispers, not in gossip, in policy drafts. By then, I had helped Harbor Bridge pass 3 local ordinances, rework a state housing relief bill, and secure over $3 million in grants for undocumented families and asylum seekers. I wasn't the voice at the podium. Not yet. But I was the voice behind the words. Then came the Winter Council vote. Portland was deciding whether to adopt a sanctuary policy for all public services, hospitals, libraries, even schools. The meeting room was packed. Some cheered. Others shouted. The man next to me, a pastor from East Portland, tugged my sleeve. "You speak better than anyone here," he said. "You should be the one reading this." I hesitated. My palms were damp. My heart hammered. But I stood, and I spoke. I spoke about fear, about policy as protection, about what it feels like to be told that your pain must be polite to deserve mercy. When I finished, the room fell silent for 3 seconds, then erupted. A week later, the ordinance passed. My inbox overflowed. Invitations, interview requests, endorsements. Then came the letter. It was from the Cascade Alliance for Justice, a grassroots coalition preparing to run independent candidates for state office. They weren't asking me to donate. They were asking me to run. I stared at the letter all night. I didn't sleep. I paced. I painted. I cried. Because I knew what it meant. It meant stepping into the light with no more mask, no more middle initials, no more hiding. It meant being seen. And I wasn't sure if I was ready. But by sunrise, I had made my decision. I called Raphael. He answered on the second ring. "I'm going to run," I said quietly. "For city council?" "No," I said. "State House." There was a long pause. "You're going to have to tell them who you are." "I know. And who you were." "I know that too." He exhaled. "Then let's make sure they know what you stand for, more than where you come from." My campaign was small. No glossy billboards, no flashy videos. Just a few volunteers, hand-printed signs, and a website that opened with one line: "Let the work speak." I didn't talk about my past. Not the video, not the family, not the exile. I talked about housing, healthcare, justice, access, dignity. At one debate, a challenger asked pointedly, "Why haven't we seen your family on the trail?" I smiled softly and said, "Because legacy is something I choose to build, not inherit." The room applauded. In November, I won, by 1,142 votes. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like exhale. On my first day walking into the state capitol, I wore a black coat and carried a single folder. Inside was the original grant proposal I had rewritten at Harbor Bridge 3 years earlier. It reminded me of who I had always been. Before titles, before policy, before power. A few months into my term, I was asked to co-chair a bipartisan commission on equitable immigration reform. I accepted. Quietly, no press release, no fanfare. Until one evening my assistant burst into my office. She held her phone up, face pale. "You need to see this." It was a headline. Charleston County Prosecutor Valerie Castillo under investigation for evidence tampering. My blood went cold. Valerie. I hadn't spoken her name aloud in over a decade. Now it stared back at me from the screen. I read the article twice, slowly. She had allegedly altered documents in an asylum trial involving a mother from Honduras. The case was now under federal review. The article mentioned potential disbarment. Even prison. Advisors told me to stay out of it. "You're a sitting governor," one said. "This is family business, dangerous optics." I nodded. But I didn't agree. This wasn't family business. This was unfinished war. Not for revenge, not for redemption, but because there were too many ghosts in that courtroom. And one of them was mine. So, I booked a flight to Charleston. No press, no entourage, no announcement. Just me. Just a woman returning to a city that had once erased her. The Charleston courthouse was colder than I remembered. High ceilings, pale walls, and echoes that seemed to whisper back every step. I entered through the side door, wearing black slacks, a long navy coat, and dark glasses. No entourage, no security, no headlines. I didn't come to make a scene. I came to witness it. Valerie sat at the front, poised in a charcoal suit, hair pulled back, not a strand out of place. She looked untouchable, but her hands told a different story. Fidgeting, clenching, and unclenching beneath the table. My mother, Evelyn, sat beside her, stiff, rosary wrapped around her wrist, eyes red-rimmed. My father, Colonel Castillo, sat at the far end of the bench, still, jaw locked, his chest rising slowly like it hurt to breathe. The courtroom buzzed quietly until the judge walked in. Tall, black robes, confident stride. Judge Marlene Griffin. I remembered her. We'd shared a brief exchange 2 years ago at a conference in Olympia where I'd spoken on restorative justice. She scanned the room, preparing to begin proceedings. Then she paused. Her eyes narrowed toward the back row. "Wait," she said slowly, squinting through the light. "Is that Noel Carter, the governor of Oregon?" The room held its breath. Every head turned. Reporters' eyes lit up. A cameraman bumped into a bench trying to swivel his lens. Valerie's mouth parted. Her entire face froze. My mother gasped and whispered something in Spanish. My father blinked, leaning forward slightly, like his mind was trying to reject the image he saw. But I didn't move. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I sat still, back straight, hands folded, letting my presence speak louder than anything they had ever said about me. The judge blinked once, then twice, composed herself. "Let's proceed," she said. But the air never settled after that. Throughout the hearing, eyes kept flicking to the back row. The governor was here, and she wasn't here to save anyone. She didn't speak, didn't take notes, didn't whisper to reporters or offer condolences. She just sat there, unbothered, unreadable. After 2 hours, the hearing adjourned for the day. I stood, quiet as I came, and slipped out the side door. By the time I got to my hotel, my phone had detonated. Dozens of missed calls, journalists, colleagues, even former classmates. My face was on the news. My name was trending. Not because of scandal. Because I had returned, and I didn't come back as a daughter, or as a sister. I came back as a reckoning. That night, I sat by the window of my room, overlooking the city I used to call home. The skyline hadn't changed much, but I had. In the reflection of the glass, I no longer saw the girl with the red backpack, humiliated and homeless. I saw a woman sharpened by exile, forged in silence, and finally standing in the light she built for herself. The next morning, my press secretary called me in a panic. "We have a problem," she said. She sent a link, and there it was, the video. Old, grainy, pixelated, but still me at 23, half drunk in a rented beach house on spring break. A boy filming with his phone, laughing. My face, my body, my voice. The headline, "The real Noel Carter?" My former boyfriend, now a nobody with a YouTube channel, was on a talk show smirking. "We were just kids," he said. She knew I had the video. I didn't think it would go this far. I stared at the screen. My staff scrambled. "We can issue a statement. We'll call legal. We can spin this. Focus on victimization. Privacy laws." "No," I said calmly. "Let them look." They blinked. "Governor?" "I've survived being seen before," I said, "and I don't flinch anymore." Later that evening, my phone rang. It was my father. His voice was hard, cold, clipped. Exactly how I remembered. "You're dragging our name through the mud," he snapped. "Using our disgrace to gain attention. You're not one of us anymore." I let the silence stretch. Then I said softly, "I've carried that name longer than you carried me." He hung up. That night, I lit a candle in front of my mirror. Not for prayer, not for peace, but as a promise. You don't get to shame what you chose to abandon. By dawn, my face was on every news station. Not for passing a new bill. Not for saving a mother from deportation. But for the same thing they had once used to cast me out. A video. A moment. A wound I never asked to carry. Commentators debated whether I could still govern. Anonymous pundits speculated about hidden trauma and emotional instability. A few dared to say I was too damaged to lead. And still, I said nothing. I didn't retreat. I didn't tweet. I didn't explain. Because silence now wasn't fear. It was control. Then came the message from my cousin in Charleston. My mother had been admitted to the hospital. Blood pressure spike, chest pains. She wasn't critical, but she was fragile. I didn't plan to go. I told myself I didn't owe them anything. But that night, as I walked through my apartment, I passed the painting I had titled Witness, a silhouette of a woman standing alone in the desert, her shadow stretching miles behind her. And I knew. Sometimes we show up not for them, but for the version of ourselves that once begged to be seen. So I booked a red-eye flight. No one knew I was coming. At the hospital, I walked in with no security, no aides, no makeup. Just a coat, a folder, and something I hadn't named yet. My mother lay small in a large bed, thinner than I remembered, older in ways that had nothing to do with time. Her eyes opened when I entered. "Noelle," she breathed. She still used the name they gave me. I didn't correct her. Her voice trembled like it would shatter if she raised it. If everything they say is true, then I've spent years not seeing you." I said nothing. I sat beside her and gently took her hand. Not as a daughter seeking forgiveness, not as someone offering it, just as myself. When she drifted off into sleep, I reached into my bag and placed something on the table beside her. It was the witness painting, the original. I didn't leave a note. I didn't stay. Back in Oregon, the media storm hadn't settled. Reporters still camped near my office. Editorials still buzzed with opinion. But I no longer felt the weight of their noise, because I knew what I was about to do. At the next cabinet meeting, I entered the room in silence. My staff looked nervous. Everyone braced for damage control. I stepped up to the podium, adjusted the mic, and spoke. "I won't rewrite the past," I said, voice steady. "But I will decide how it gets used from here on out." And then I opened the meeting like I always did, with focus, with clarity, without apology. Later that week, the indictment came. Valerie Castillo, formally charged with evidence tampering, disbarment proceedings underway, criminal trial pending. Her name, once synonymous with honor and success, now clung to scandal like oil on water. I watched the news coverage from my office. Silent, still. 1,000 thoughts blooming and dying in the space between heartbeats. And then, just past midnight, my phone lit up again. One new message. From her, Valerie. The text was short. "Please. Just dinner. One time. Just us." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Not out of anger, but because I honestly didn't know which version of her I would be walking into. But I said yes. Not for her, not even for closure. I went because I was no longer afraid of what they might try to take from me, because they had already taken it all, and I had built something better. I arrived at the Castillo home just before sundown. The porch was smaller than I remembered, shrinking like time had finally begun to press in on this place that once pressed so hard on me. The door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there, makeup barely hiding the fatigue beneath her eyes. She gave me a smile, hesitant, hopeful, already cracking. "Come in," she whispered. Inside, the air was heavy with lemon oil and expectation. Everything had been polished to perfection. The silverware, the floors, even the picture frames. It was the same house, only older, stiffer, more fragile, under the weight of pretending nothing ever broke here. At the dining table, my father sat at the head, freshly ironed shirt, tie tight, jaw tighter. Valerie sat at the far end. She looked smaller too, not physically, but in presence. Gone was the courtroom armor. Her hair wasn't curled. Her lips held no lipstick, only the ghost of a smile she couldn't wear convincingly anymore. They had saved my old seat for me. Same chair, but reupholstered, new leather, stitched too tightly over wood I once carved my name into as a child. The meal was elaborate. Enchiladas, roasted squash, handmade tortillas no one touched. They tried small talk. My mother mentioned I used to draw on napkins. My father said, "Your campaign posters were quite impressive. I read one of your speeches. It was clumsy, like watching people rehearse a play they never believed in." I stayed silent, letting the words pass over me like wind over stone. Eventually, Valerie spoke. Her voice was small, almost human. "I know I messed up," she said. "I never thought it would go this far." There it was, the prelude. Then came the ask. My mother reached across the table, hand trembling but determined. "We were thinking," she started, "maybe you could speak to the federal prosecutor. Just a recommendation. A few words. Not official, just sister to sister." I looked around the table, at the mother who had once turned away in a hospital hallway, at the father who had left my bank card on a table like a final transaction, at the sister who had whispered into his ear, once upon a time, "She's the one in the video." I set my fork down slowly. The click was loud in the silence. "If I weren't the governor," I asked, "would I still be your daughter?" No one answered, not a word. Only the sound of breath caught in throats that had never said sorry. I stood. The leather chair squeaked under the shift of weight. "I kept your name," I said. "But I built my life without you in it." I turned toward the door. "Wait!" my mother called, voice cracking. "Please, Noelle." But I didn't look back. The air outside was sharp, clean, mine. Later that night at 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzed again. A photo. Then another. Then a flood. Grainy screenshots of the old video, private emails from my early 20s, a blurry photo of me crying outside a shelter in downtown Portland from the year I had nothing. No caption, no sender, just silence wrapped in threat. I sat in the dark, staring at the screen. My pulse didn't race. My hands didn't shake. Not fear, just calculation. By 9 a.m., my communications director knocked on my office door, her face pale. "We've got something," she said, sliding a tablet across my desk. There it was again, now as a headline. "The real Noelle Carter? Leaked files raise questions about governor's past." I said nothing. At noon, a discreet call came from an old friend at the Justice Department. "You didn't hear it from me," he said. "But your father's been making inquiries, digging, background vetting. Someone's trying to find leverage." I closed my eyes, just for a moment, then opened them sharper than glass. This wasn't concern, it was warning. It was strategy disguised as family. That evening, I didn't wait for the storm to arrive. I walked into it. The next morning, I stood at a podium in downtown Denver. No flags behind me, no carefully staged entourage. Just a single white spotlight and a wall of hand-drawn posters from immigrant children we had helped over the years. I wore a crisp white blazer, no jewelry, no script, only the truth. "We've all seen how power works," I began, my voice steady. "It doesn't always come in the form of weapons or laws. Sometimes it comes in whispers, in family dinners turned into blackmail, in threats wrapped in nostalgia." I let the words settle. "This bill is for anyone who's ever had their past used against them by the people who were supposed to protect them." Then I introduced the Justice Witness Protection Act, a proposal that would criminalize attempts to manipulate or silence public officials, whistleblowers, or civil servants through personal or familial coercion. It was bold. It was deeply personal. And it was deliberate. I didn't name names I didn't have to. By that evening, my name was everywhere. Again. But this time, I wasn't a scandal. I was a statement. Editorials called the bill necessary. Op-eds praised the clarity of my voice. Activist groups rallied behind it, calling it the beginning of a new kind of safety. And the Reyes, no, the Castillos, went silent. No more calls, no more texts. Not even another midnight message. They had tried to weaponize my story. Instead, I turned it into law. A few days later, I walked to a neighborhood cafe in Denver. No reporters followed. No cameras waited. I ordered a coffee, sat by the window, watched a group of teenagers laugh over their phones. No one recognized me. And I liked it that way. Because power, I had learned, isn't about being seen. It's about being able to walk through a world that once tried to erase you and not needing their eyes to validate your presence. That afternoon, my assistant knocked on my door with hesitation. "Governor," she said. "Valerie Castillo is in the lobby. She didn't make an appointment." There was a pause. I nodded. "Send her in." She entered slowly. No makeup, no tailored suit, just jeans and a plain sweater. Her posture slumped with the weight of what she never thought she'd have to carry. She sat across from me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said quietly, "I don't want to go to prison, but I'm not here to ask you to save me." I said nothing. "I stepped on you to climb higher," she said, voice cracking. "And now I can't even see where you are. I think you've reached something I never understood." Still, I didn't speak. I just wanted to say, "Thank you for not hating me more than I deserve." There was a long silence between us. Not painful, just honest. When she stood to leave, her hand brushed a folder on my desk. Inside it was a copy of a clemency letter, unsigned, unaddressed. I had written it once, I burned it that morning. I didn't stop her, I didn't hand her anything. Because some doors stay closed not out of anger, but because peace lives on the other side. A week later, I stood at a conference on family justice reform. The room was filled with people who had lost something at the hands of blood. Daughters, sons, whistleblowers, survivors. When I walked on stage, the moderator introduced me with just 3 words: governor, advocate, witness. I stood at the mic. "I was once erased," I began, "not by strangers, but by people who said they loved me." I scanned the audience. My mother sat near the front. Quiet, smaller somehow. Her hands clasped too tightly. Farther back, almost hidden by shadows, sat my father. No suit, no uniform, just a man aging in silence. I didn't pause. "I'm not here to shame them," I said. "I'm here so my future children know that love without safety isn't love at all." Then I announced a new initiative, the Public Kinship Act, a policy that would allow public servants to disclose toxic or coercive family relationships without fear of retaliation, demotion, or being branded disloyal. "This," I said, "is how we protect the truth, even when it lives inside our own blood." No thunderous applause, just quiet nods. A stillness filled with something deeper than praise. Outside, the snow had begun to fall. Afterward, as the room emptied, my father approached slowly. No crowd, no microphone, just him. "I never understood my daughter," he said, voice low. "But maybe I don't need to. Maybe I just need to admit that you did what I never could." I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just bowed my head, not out of surrender, but out of release. And then I walked into the snow, not alone, but unburdened, because I no longer needed to be remembered by them. I had already remembered myself.